welcome back to the Bene channel. Today we have a very special guest, Eric Stoner. Eric is the co-founder of Waging Nonviolence and a journalist. He teaches classes on nonviolence and civil resistance at St. Joseph's College in Brooklyn. Eric, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be with you.
Cool. So Eric, I was wondering, when were you first introduced to nonviolence and what were your first reactions?
So I have kind of an unusual story, I guess. I actually grew up in a kind of small town in the Midwest and more of like a conservative, family, community, church. And so I wasn't ever really exposed to nonviolence kind of growing up. And I think the first time I was maybe made aware of it or that I can remember was while I was in college. Um, and and I first had a class that did get into Gandhi and the movement in India, but it didn't really, at that point, it didn't really stick. I was kind of interested, but it wasn't something that totally, I guess, grabbed me for whatever reason. And then later in college, between my junior and senior year, I did an internship in Washington, D.C. And part of the internship program was you had to take a class. And I took a course called Solutions to Violence with this incredible teacher, Coleman McCarthy. And he's still teaching around D.C., and he was a columnist for the Washington Post for I think like 30 years, but like a pacifist, anarchist, fascinating guy, and just an incredible teacher. And I was pretty conservative politically at the time, and so yeah, I didn't immediately respond like I did favorably. I was like questioning and critical and how could this be, because it was so foreign. But the class was also like, I was really intrigued by it because it was just so much information and perspective that is just not taught. It was a fascinating class. He brought in a lot of guest speakers that had really incredible life experience and stories and their own kind of conversions to nonviolence. And it was just a very like powerful experience for me. And kind of over the course of that summer, I just felt like my heart was calling me to change directions, because I was on a very, very different track. And I was like, this feels like what I should try to do with my life. And it was kind of a very transformative conversion kind of experience that I felt like I had that summer. And anyways, it was really, I feel like really changed my life. And also, I think made me a real believer in like the power of education and that's, I think, one reason why I've gone on to do what I do with my work, because I feel like, at least for me, I felt like a lot of people go along with violence or support violence, at least in part because they're ignorant about any alternatives, and once you kind of start to learn about these stories and this history, it's hard to, I think, deny that there's like that there is another way that we could, live and be in the world. And so, yeah, it was that was kind of my initial exposure. I think I was 20 years old, and it really like changed my life. So.
That is amazing. That is so cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I really relate with a lot of parts of that story. That's very interesting. And that's how old I am now. So that's really
Oh,
cool. I'm 20.
yeah.
Cool. So Next, can you tell me about Waging Nonviolence and why you co-founded it and why it is so important today?
So yeah, Waging Nonviolence is a online publication, magazine that covers social movements and nonviolence and activism around the world. And I started it with a couple journalist friends about 12 years ago now, which is hard to believe. But I think at the time we started it, thinking that there really wasn't a lot of good media that really had this kind of particular focus on nonviolence and how it works, and kind of we wanted to like there were a couple older kind of print magazines that did write about this, but they didn't come out that often, and there wasn't like a website that was really alive and really vibrant at the time. And we felt like there was this niche that we could try to fill. And I think the idea at the time too was like we wanted to challenge the way that people understood what nonviolence is and what it means. And by that we kind of meant that we wanted to like, I think when people think of protest or they think of nonviolence, sometimes they just think of the standard, march or like people holding signs on a street corner kind of a thing. And we wanted to really show like how vibrant like nonviolence can be, and the limitless kind of ways that it can be expressed. So it was kind of like wanting to show the creative side and how nonviolence kind of related to art and music and dance and humor, and just like the kind of creativity that can be kind of unleashed with nonviolence. And so yeah, to kind of expand people's idea of what that involves. And I think also to try to highlight like the small victories that movements are making all the time, because I think activists often aren't very good at kind of taking stock of their where they how far they've come. I think we often have like a big vision for how the world can be different, and we're not there. And so I think people always hold out this like long-term vision for where we can or should be, but then they have a hard time saying, well, but we've made some positive steps. And like I think we need to kind of take time to acknowledge those and celebrate those kind of victories along the way, because I feel like that's also what can help build momentum, right, for movements. That people It's going to make more people want to get involved if they feel like, oh, there's some progress here. We're kind of racking up some successes. And so it's also about like, yeah, trying to like create like an attractive like image for what this involves and what the movement can do and the possibilities. And so I think we always were kind of intentional about that with the way that we wanted to like tell stories, and also like create a space that like delved into the strategy and the tactics kind of behind movements, because you know I think now there is a lot more media that does cover protest and social movements, um, but I think the way that traditional media kind of approaches stories, it's still often more about like looking at the like the why, so like why are people out in the streets, and exploring like the injustice behind a movement. But they rarely like explore like, I think what we're most interested in is the how, like how are people building power, how are movements like created, and what is the plan and what is the strategy, and what's the vision, and we want to understand like the inner workings of kind of how movements tick and how nonviolence looks like at a very kind of close up kind of level. And so I think that's one thing that we felt like we could do with the website as well. We also kind of wanted to, I think that class that I took that really changed my life, it was a mixture of like the readings that we did and the videos we watched were a mixture of like the faith-based approach to nonviolence and the more kind of strategic approach. And I think I was really drawn to both. I thought that there was a lot of interesting, like I was very impacted by the stories in each of those kinds of perspectives and worlds. And when we started the site, we felt like that was a division. There was kind of a division in the nonviolence world along those lines. And so I think we were trying to intend to like bring those worlds together on the site, you know, where they could hopefully be in communication more with each other, because we felt like the faith-based folks could learn something valuable from the strategic people and vice versa, you know, and that if we could have a more powerful kind of movement for nonviolence if we all were able to kind of come together more and work together. So that was also a major kind of reason why we started the website, or that was an intention behind it.
Well, thank you so much. I love Waging Nonviolence. I go on y'all's website all the time. I've been doing it for years. So people who are watching, go down in the description and go read on Waging Nonviolence. It's so good. And my last, yes.
I was just say it's been a really fun project. I feel like we've you know, we published like, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 stories now on the site, from like over 90 countries around the world. And like, even as an editor, I'm just constantly learning, you know, I'm just being exposed to so many new campaigns and new issues and actions that are really inspiring, you know. And I think I often feel like I'm a little bit more hopeful than your average person, because I'm like constantly being exposed to like all the good work that people are doing around the world and how that's kind of like bubbling up everywhere. And yet a lot of these stories don't get attention in other media. And so I do feel like, you know, it's important to like pay attention to these stories and also like balance what you read and what you take in, because if you just pay attention to like the mainstream media, it's like, you know, it's can be really depressing, you know. And I mean, there are a lot of obviously serious problems in the world, but there's also a lot of people trying to change that and to do good. And so I feel like you need to really be intentional about, you know, what you read and what you take in, so that you don't kind of become apathetic and lose hope, you know. So
It's really true. Yeah. Thank you, Eric.
yeah.
And my last question is, what does nonviolence mean to you?
That's a big one. Yeah, I think like it has impacted me on a lot of different levels. Like I was saying, like I think um, from like a personal perspective, I feel like nonviolence is really kind of the embodiment of just like the golden rule, you know, and wanting to treat people like you'd want to be treated, and you know, I don't think anybody wants to experience violence or to be bombed or, you know, like, so it's kind of like just this very basic idea, but one that's, I guess, a lot harder to live out or to put into practice. But I think I grew up Catholic. And so it was, when I first started to think about it in that way, it really struck me that it was just like, it is like the most basic ethical kind of rule. Like if you actually think about what does that mean and how do you live that out? That's, you know, nonviolence is like, you know, critical to that, right? I think I was also like drawn to like some of the philosophical ideas around it. So like the idea of like the connection between means, right? That like um, you need to have use means that are consistent with the ends that you're fighting for or that you want to see in the world. And so that if you ultimately want a world without war, want a world without violence, without with social justice, that you can't use violence to get there. That you're violating you're violating that in the process. And that you know I remember this reading Hannah Arendt's book on violence, and she had this thing that really struck me where she says that that essentially you can't control the end, right? You don't know what the end is going to be. I mean, you can have the vision for what it should be, but like you can't control that the only thing that you control is the means that you use to get there, right? And so like yeah, you could have this incredible utopian beautiful vision for the future world, but you can't make that a reality on your own. The only thing you control is what you do right here and right now. And like that's why like nonviolence I think is so important, because it's like living out your values like consistently in the moment right now, and then I think I was also really drawn to like I said, like this big picture, like the strategic kind of side of things. And I do really believe that nonviolence is like the most effective kind of way to confront injustice in the world. And so that it's not just like the most morally moral kind of approach, but that it really is like the most effective. And that I've been inspired by some of the academic even research coming out by for Erica Chenoweth and Maria Steffen, for example, that just shows that like even that it really has been more effective at like in some of the most difficult situations possible than violent movements or armed kind of campaigns. And so it's been really nice to see like the academic side of this kind of verify and prove what I think people in the nonviolence world have been saying for a long time, but we didn't have the ability to kind of like prove it in that kind of academic sense. So I've been inspired by that as well, and I really do feel like it is the most, it's the way that we can, best kind of challenge kind of like authoritarian governments around the world, and fight for basically the full range of like social justice, environmental justice, economic justice issues, that we're dealing with right now. So yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Eric. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our audience has too. Thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing all of this with us.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
Okay.